Have you ever done something kind for someone you didn't know, without expecting anything in return? What if that one small act changed your life forever? Rebecca Miller never imagined that handing out a sandwich would lead to the biggest twist in her story. She was a quiet woman, someone you'd pass on the street without noticing. She worked at the city library, surrounded by books and silence, living a simple life. But behind that calm face was a heart that cared deeply for people, especially those the world had forgotten. Every evening, after closing the library, Rebecca had a routine. She would pack leftover food, sometimes from the library staff kitchen, other times from her own small lunch, and head toward the park. Not many people visited that park in the winter. It was too cold, too dark, and far too lonely. But she went anyway. Why? Because she believed someone out there might be hungry. Someone might be cold. Someone might just need a little kindness to get through the night. And in that small, quiet belief, she never missed a day. That night, the wind was brutal. Snow fell in heavy sheets, the kind that sticks to your coat and freezes your eyelashes. Most people were rushing home, desperate for warmth. But Rebecca, wrapped in a scarf and holding a small paper bag, walked against the wind with quiet determination. 2 sandwiches, a muffin, a thermos of tea. It didn't seem like much. But to her, it was a gesture that meant someone still cared. As she entered the park, everything was still. The benches were dusted with snow, the trees looked like they had been frozen mid-dream, and the lamps barely gave off light through the icy air. That's when she saw him. A man, hunched over on a bench beneath the tall elm tree. His head was low. His clothes were worn and tattered. Snow clung to his shoulders, unmoving, like he had been sitting there far too long. Rebecca's footsteps slowed. She had seen many homeless people before, left food for several, but something about this man was different. There was a heaviness around him. A stillness that didn't feel like sleep, it felt like surrender. She approached slowly. Her voice was soft. "Would you like something to eat?" He stirred, slowly lifting his head. And in that moment, she saw him. Not just his face, pale from the cold, lined with exhaustion, but his eyes. They were tired, dark, and deep. The kind of eyes that had seen too much and remembered too little. "Food?" he asked, his voice rough and broken. Rebecca nodded. "Yes. Just some sandwiches and tea." He looked at his own hands, almost confused by them. Then reached out, trembling. She handed him the bag. He held it like it might disappear. Then he said something that froze her more than the wind ever could. "I don't remember who I am." And just like that, everything changed. Stay with us until the end of this story, because what started as one woman's quiet kindness will turn into a beautiful, unforgettable twist of fate, one that you'll remember long after the video ends. You won't want to miss what happens next. Rebecca didn't know what to say at first. The words "I don't remember who I am" echoed in her ears, louder than the wind around them. She had helped people before, people who were down on their luck, who had nothing, but never someone who didn't even know their own name. She looked at him, really looked. There was something in his face. Not just sadness, but confusion. Like he was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. "Then I'll call you James," she said gently, as if offering him something small but important. Just for now, so we can talk." The man blinked.
"James," he repeated softly, as if tasting the name.
"That sounds okay." They sat there for a few minutes, not saying much. Rebecca poured him a cup of tea from the thermos. He took it carefully, hands still shaking from the cold. As he sipped it, he closed his eyes, and a tear rolled slowly down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He just let it fall. "Thank you," he whispered. "I didn't think anyone would ever see me again." Rebecca felt something move in her chest. A quiet ache she couldn't explain. She placed a hand gently on his arm and said, "Everyone deserves to be seen." The snow kept falling around them. The world was cold and quiet, but for the first time in a long while, James didn't feel invisible. From that night on, Rebecca came to the park every evening. No matter how cold it got. No matter how tired she was. She packed a little food, some tea, sometimes a hot meal from a nearby diner, and walked the same path to the same bench. And James was always there. At first, he didn't say much. He just listened. Rebecca would talk about her day, about funny things she saw at the library, or about books she loved. She didn't push him to remember anything. She didn't ask questions he couldn't answer. She just sat with him. Slowly, James began to speak too. Not about who he was, he still had no memory, but about thoughts, feelings, observations. He told her how the snow looked like art. Like a painting he had once seen, though he couldn't remember where. He spoke about the way silence could feel heavy or peaceful, depending on who you were sitting next to. One night, Rebecca brought him a donated book of old philosophy essays. He turned the pages slowly, his eyes catching on a line that read, "We are our choices." He looked up at her and said, "Maybe I don't remember my past because it doesn't matter. Maybe who I am now is who I choose to be." Rebecca didn't know what to say. But deep down, she agreed. James might have been lost, but the man sitting beside her was kind, thoughtful, and quietly strong. She didn't need to know his history to see his heart. Over time, something unspoken began to grow between them. It wasn't just about food anymore. It wasn't just about kindness. She found herself looking forward to their conversations. Smiling more during the day, just thinking about the evening. She noticed how her steps felt lighter as she walked to the park. How her heart beat faster when she saw him waiting on that bench. And sometimes, James smiled too. A soft, shy kind of smile. The kind that felt like it came from somewhere deep inside. They didn't talk about what this connection meant. Neither of them dared to name it yet. But it was there, growing quietly, night after night, like the first bloom of spring beneath a blanket of snow. Still, neither of them knew just how much their story was about to change. One evening, Rebecca reached the park like she always did. The cold was still sharp, but something felt different. As she neared the familiar bench, a soft, surprising smell drifted through the air, something warm. Something homemade. There, under the tall elm tree, James stood next to a tiny old camping stove. A small pot sat on top, steam curling into the chilly night air like a quiet promise. Rebecca blinked. "What's all this?" James looked nervous, his hands stuffed into the sleeves of his worn coat. "I traded an old watch for the stove." One of the shelter workers gave me some vegetables yesterday. I thought maybe, tonight I could feed you. Rebecca stared at him, stunned. You cooked this? He nodded quickly, eyes lowering like he was embarrassed. It's just soup. Not much. But you've been bringing me food and warmth for weeks. I wanted to do something for you. She didn't know what to say. Her heart was full, too full for words. She sat beside him, accepting the steaming cup he carefully poured. The soup was simple: potatoes, carrots, maybe a little garlic, but it tasted like care. Like effort. Like love, in its gentlest form. It's wonderful, she said softly, smiling. James relaxed a little, and for a while, they just sat there, sharing the meal in silence. The drizzle turned to steady rain, soaking the park. James quickly grabbed the pot and stove. Come on, he said. There's an old gardener's shed. It's dry, at least. Rebecca followed, laughing quietly as the rain soaked her hair. Inside the shed, it was musty and dim, but it felt like shelter. They sat on the floor, wrapped in a shared blanket. The air between them felt warmer than it should have. James wiped his sleeve over his wet face and chuckled. Sorry. This isn't exactly fine dining. Rebecca turned to him and whispered, It's perfect. And so are you. He looked at her sharply, eyes wide. You don't even know who I am. She shook her head gently. You're James. That's who you are to me. Outside, the rain tapped softly on the tin roof. Inside, something fragile and beautiful bloomed. I wonder sometimes, James said, his voice low, if it's better this way. Not remembering. Just being here with you. No past. No lies. No mistakes. Just James. Rebecca reached out and brushed her fingers over his hand. Then stay James. Whoever you were before doesn't matter. If this, she gestured between them, is real. He looked down at her hand resting on his, then slowly closed his fingers around hers. His grip was unsure, but it meant something. You're not afraid? He asked. I should be, she whispered. But I'm not. A quiet moment passed. Then James moved closer. Slowly, carefully, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. Rebecca didn't pull away. She leaned into him, letting the warmth of his presence wrap around her like the blanket they shared. He held her, not tightly, not like he was claiming something, but like he was holding something precious. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. In that small, forgotten shed, something real had formed. Something neither of them had planned for, but both of them needed. Later, as the rain eased, they stepped outside together. The park was quiet again. The storm had passed. And in Rebecca's heart, one thing was suddenly, deeply clear: she wasn't just helping a stranger anymore. She was falling in love with the man who made her soup in the rain. The days that followed felt like a quiet dream. Rebecca and James continued meeting every evening. Their connection grew stronger. Their laughter came easier. And though James still didn't remember his past, he seemed more at peace, not with where he had come from, but with who he was becoming. But peace doesn't last forever. One night,
after a long shift at the library, Rebecca returned to her apartment. The city was quiet, her tea had gone cold, and she flipped through the TV channels without really watching. Then, suddenly, the words on the screen caught her attention. Still no updates on the mysterious disappearance of tech mogul Matthew Kane. She sat up straight, her heart thudding.
The news anchor's voice continued, calm but dramatic. The CEO of Key Tech vanished nearly 2 months ago after a car accident on a remote mountain road.
Though no body was found, a possible sighting has raised new questions.
Rebecca's eyes locked on the photo that appeared on the screen. It was a man in a suit, standing at a press event. Clean-shaven. Well-dressed. But the jawline, the shape of the eyes, the way he stood. Her breath caught. It looked just like James.
Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone and searched the name, Matthew Kane.
Image after image loaded. Board meetings. Speaking events. Headlines. And in every single one, his face, was there. Her James might not be James at all. He might be a missing billionaire.
The next morning, at the library, she printed one of the photos and hid it inside a book. All day, her mind swirled with questions.
Was it really him? Why didn't he remember? Was he dangerous? Was he hiding?
But beneath the fear, there was something deeper.
Grief. Because if James was really Matthew Kane, then who was the man she had fallen for?
That night, with the folded photo tucked in her coat pocket, she walked to the park. Her steps were heavier than usual. When she saw him, sitting quietly on their bench, sketching something into the frost with a stick, he looked up and smiled. But then his smile faded.
Rebecca? What's wrong? She didn't answer right away.
She sat beside him, hands shaking slightly. Then, slowly, she handed him the folded paper.
I need you to look at this.
James unfolded the photo with care, like he already sensed it carried something heavy. His eyes scanned it once.
Then again.
His hands started to tremble.
Is this you? She asked quietly.
He stared at it, his voice cracking.
I've seen this suit. I've dreamed about it. I've seen glass buildings. A woman screaming. Headlights. I thought it was just a nightmare. She touched his arm gently. Do you remember anything else?
He shut his eyes tight.
I was in a car at night. Someone was chasing me. Voices yelling. They said I knew too much. That I needed to disappear. He opened his eyes again. Then I woke up in an alley. Cold. Bleeding. No name. No wallet. Nothing. Rebecca whispered, James. I think you're Matthew Kane. People think you're dead. He stood up quickly, panic in his movements. No. No, that can't be. That person, that life, I don't remember it. I don't want to remember it. He stared at the photo, like it was something dangerous. I finally feel something real here with you. If I go back, what if I lose all this? Rebecca stood slowly. Then don't go back. Not yet. But if your past is coming, we need to be ready.
James sank back onto the bench, his voice soft.
All this time, I thought I was nobody. But maybe I ran away from somebody I couldn't be anymore. Someone I hated. You don't know that, Rebecca said. I don't know anything, he whispered. Then, after a long silence, he looked up and said firmly, even if I was Matthew Kane, I don't want to be him again. I want to be James. The man who waited in the cold for you. The man who made you soup. Rebecca smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. Then you're James to me. You always have been. He looked at the photo once more, then folded it carefully and placed it back in her hand. I trust you, he said. You're the only part of this world that feels safe. They sat together, snow beginning to fall once more. Around them, the world felt uncertain. The truth had come out, but what it meant was still unclear. All they knew in that moment was that they still had each other. The next morning, everything changed. It started with a photo. Someone had snapped it without them knowing, Rebecca handing James a cup of tea, her fingers gently brushing his arm. A simple moment. But when the world saw it, it exploded. Missing billionaire found living as homeless man. Librarian caring for disguised CEO. Matthew Kane discovered in City Park. Rebecca's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters showed up outside the library, cameras in hand, shouting her name. Miss Miller. Did you know he was Matthew Kane? Are you in love with a billionaire? She kept her head down, heart racing. Her quiet life had shattered overnight. She was no longer just a librarian. She was now part of a story the world couldn't stop talking about. James, no, Matthew, was everywhere. On screens. In papers. Online. His face was back in the world, whether he wanted it or not. The board of Key Tech, the company he once led, sent men in dark suits to find him. The company needs you, they said. You need to return. The world thinks you're dead. We need answers. He felt the ground shift beneath him. His memories were still blurry. His heart still unsure. But now, the pressure was unmistakable. The weight of the name Matthew Kane had returned. That evening, he stood at Rebecca's door. She opened it slowly, her eyes filled with questions, fear, and love all at once. You saw it, he said quietly. She nodded. They're outside. They won't stop. He stepped inside but didn't sit. They want me back, he said. Key Tech. My old life. But I don't even know who that is anymore. You don't have to go, she said softly. Not if you're not ready. He looked at her, his voice tight. But I'm already out there. The truth is out. They know who I am. And now they know who you are. You're caught in this, because of me. I'm not afraid of them, she said. You should be, he replied, barely above a whisper. You didn't fall in love with Matthew Kane. You fell in love with James. The man with no past. Tears welled up in her eyes. He's still here. He shook his head slowly. He disappeared the moment the world remembered me. She stepped closer, reaching for him. Don't push me away. He looked at her, his eyes full of sorrow. They'll dig into your life. They'll twist everything. You deserve peace. I can't give that to you now." Her voice broke. "So, are you leaving?" He paused, then nodded slowly. "I need to figure this out before I drag you down with me." He opened the door. Rain fell gently outside, blurring the lights of the street. "Please don't shut me out," she whispered. He looked back, his eyes heavy with pain. "I'll come back, if I still have the right to." And then he was gone. Rebecca stood in the doorway for a long time. The room behind her felt too quiet. The world outside, too loud. The man she had loved, James, had been swallowed by a name she never asked for, Matthew Kane. In the days that followed, everything felt smaller. At the library, whispers followed her. Some people offered support. Others offered judgment. She smiled politely, answered gently. But inside, a part of her was empty. He was gone, and no one could fill that space. In the news, she saw him, back in his suit, sitting at board meetings, speaking on stages. The comeback of Matthew Kane, they called it. But she looked at his eyes in those photos. They weren't smiling. They weren't James. They spoke on the phone, at first. Short calls. Careful words. "Everything's happening so fast," he'd say. "They want me to be the man I used to be." "Are you?" she once asked. He paused, then said softly, "I don't know. I still feel like James. But no one here understands that." The calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether. And Rebecca was left with silence. She missed the man who made her soup in the rain, who waited on a bench just to see her face, who said her name like it meant something. Now, he lived in a world where she didn't belong. One evening, she sat on their old bench in the park. Spring had come. The snow was gone. But the emptiness stayed. In her coat pocket was a letter she'd written but never sent. "I miss your quiet. I miss the man who didn't need to be anyone but mine. Maybe the world needs you more than I do." But she never mailed it. Weeks passed. Then months. And the man she loved remained a memory. A question with no answer. A name that once didn't matter, but now meant everything. It was a quiet Thursday morning at the library. Rebecca was shelving books, just like she always did. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, casting golden light across the wooden floors. The world had calmed since the storm of headlines. But inside her, something still waited. She told herself to move on. She told herself to forget. But every time the door creaked open, a part of her heart still looked up, still hoped. And this time, it wasn't a dream. She looked up and froze. It was him. Not the man from the newspapers. Not the billionaire in a suit. But him. Standing in the doorway in a simple navy coat, hair slightly messy, eyes soft and uncertain. In his hands, he held a worn-out book. The room seemed to go still. People stopped talking. Time slowed. Rebecca couldn't breathe. He stepped toward her, slowly, carefully. He placed the book on the counter,
his voice trembling.
"May I speak to you?" She could only nod. He opened the book.
Inside, the pages had been cut out, forming a hidden space. And inside that space was a small velvet box.
Gasps echoed in the library. But Rebecca heard only her heartbeat.
He picked up the box, knelt down, and looked up at her.
"When I met you, I had no name. No past. No future," he said. "You gave me warmth. You gave me the name James. And in that, I found myself." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears.
"I remember it all now," he continued.
"The life I had. The mistakes. The pressure. But none of it ever mattered like you did." He opened the box.
Inside was a simple silver ring with a small, beautiful diamond.
"I don't want to be Matthew Kane anymore.
I want to be James, the man who made you laugh in the cold and waited every night just to see your face."
His voice broke. "I want to be yours. Rebecca Miller, will you marry me?" Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't speak right away. She just nodded again and again before whispering, "Yes, yes, I will." The entire library clapped. Quiet, respectful applause.
Matthew stood, sliding the ring onto her finger, pulling her into his arms.
In that moment, the world faded. It was just them.
"I'm never leaving again," he whispered.
Rebecca touched his face like she needed to make sure he was real. "You really came back." "I had to," he said. "When I had everything, I was lost. But when I had nothing, I had you. And that was everything."
Later that day, they sat on the library steps, watching the world go by.
Passers-by pointed. Some whispered. Cameras flashed. But none of it mattered anymore. "So, fiancé," he said with a smile. Rebecca laughed through her tears. "Only if I can still call you James." He smiled back. "Forever." They married in the same library where he had proposed. It was a small ceremony, just close friends, co-workers, and a few regular patrons who had quietly cheered their love story from the sidelines. No red carpets. No paparazzi. Just soft music, honest vows, and eyes full of tears. After the wedding, they launched something new together, the James Project. Not named after Matthew Kane, but named after the man who had lived with nothing and learned what truly matters. It was their way of giving back. A program that helped the homeless not just survive, but start again. With shelter, support, mental care, job training, and dignity. Rebecca became the heart of the project. Matthew, now James again, used his resources to make it grow. What began as a small community center soon expanded to cities across the country. And their story became one of hope. Years passed. They moved into a quiet home. Nothing too big. Nothing too flashy. Just peace. Just love. Their daughter, Emily, grew up hearing how it all began. She called it the snow story. And every year, on the same date, they returned to the old park bench under the tall elm tree. On the 20th anniversary of the James Project, they visited again. James had gray in his hair now. Rebecca wore glasses. Emily walked between them, arms linked with theirs. They sat quietly. James reached for Rebecca's hand and whispered, "It all started here." She smiled. "With a sandwich. And a name." Emily looked up at them with wonder. "Do you think it was fate?" Rebecca looked at her husband, then said gently, "No. I think it was kindness. One small act. That's all it took to change everything." James nodded. Never underestimate what one moment can become. They stood and walked on, leaving behind the bench, but never the story. Because love, real love, doesn't always come with flowers or fireworks. Sometimes it comes quietly. In the snow. In a paper bag. In the name James. And that kind of love? It stays forever.